G'day folks, and welcome to Gormo's Shed. Well, this week again we're looking at the three-link coupling that I've been developing, and I feel that now it is at the stage where it's quite usable and ready to release all the full details about it. So what we'll do first of all is show you a quick video on the conversion of a mainline wagon over to this system and how I go about it. Although in saying that, each wagon will present its own particular problems. You know, there will be variations in ways that you may have to set it up. But I'll show you this particular wagon, and a thing to bear in mind also is it's the same with locomotives. It just depends on how you can access the locomotive and get at it. So first of all we'll look at this video, and then we'll come back and we'll show some wagons running around and shunting and all that sort of thing. Okay folks, this is the wagon we're going to work on. It's an old mainline wagon, and as you can see it has these rather large tension lock couplings, and we're going to remove those. The way I prefer to do it is to take the wagon apart. I need to be working on the chassis anyway, but with the chassis separate, there's less chance of any other part of the wagon getting damaged. It's just the way I prefer to do it, so we'll be working on the chassis alone. Now this is what's left on the chassis. It's the mounting block for the tension lock coupling, so this area has to be removed. I'll use a mini disc to cut most of it away, and then I'll be using a file and probably a knife to get it down to this stage here where it's nice and flat. Now you can see there that there's a hole there which is left over from the screw from the tension lock coupling, and I'll use that hole as a guide to drill out a hole, because I need to drill out a hole to accept a small neodymium magnet. This is about 3 millimeters across, I think. I've drilled out the hole as close as I can to the buffer beam, and it's generous in that the magnet will fit in there quite easily without any need to push it through. It's going in there, and slightly above centre, but anyway we'll get into that. After I've drilled those holes, I then drill a hole through the centre of the buffer beam to accept a coupling hook and eventually a chain at the other end. And I'm using these staples as coupling hooks. I cut them down. I use these because they are attracted to a magnet. They have a nice flat area on them, and it creates a nice surface area to attract the chain to. They're used in this sort of gun, which is probably best used for upholstery and that sort of thing, so they're heavy duty staples. This is what they look like. You can see the nice flat surface area there. Now to fit this hook and chain into the buffer beams, they will pass through the buffer beam, so I needed to cut just a little bit off the wagon weight, just a small amount to give me the clearance to do it. Now when I cut the staple, the part I'm cutting here now is the actual hook, and I've set myself up here with a spacer between the top of the hook and the pliers, so I can always cut the same distance. If I had the staple down flush with the pliers, the right angle section would be too short, and I finish up with a hook like that. It needs to be at least the thickness of the chain on the right angle section there, but a bit more is good for insurance. And then I pick it up in the pliers, and the hole that was drilled is smaller than this hook, and I have to encourage it to go through the hole by working it from side to side, generally sort of pressure fitting it through. And there you can see it's fit through. Now, I've come up with a measurement of 4 millimeters, but anywhere between 4 and 5 millimeters works. That's the distance that it comes out from the buffer beam. And once that's in place, I'll then fit the magnet on top of the staple on the underneath side there. You can't quite see it there, and when it's in place, I put some super glue on there to hold everything in place, and it won't move. Now we get on to the other end where the chain is going to be fitted. So same size drill bit, I drill a hole through the buffer beam in the centre, and I'm using 0.85 millimeter galvanized wire here, which is a garden wire, and that's been pre-straightened. If you look at one of my earlier Gormo Shed videos, there is one about how to straighten wire using a drill, and it's very effective. So I cut off about 30 millimeters of wire, which is very generous because I don't really need that much. And I'm going to bend it into a shape using this hinge as a thickness guide, and 2 pieces of aluminium 3 mil thick stuck together to give me 6 mils, and that's the way I determine how much overhang I need on the hinge before I bend it. You can see here I've mounted it in a vise with 6 mil of the wire protruding above the top of the hinge. I then hold the wire as well with a pair of pliers against the hinge, and I take a hammer and gently bend that wire at a right angle across the top of the hinge, across the top of the end of the hinge, like so. Then we gently bend it down the other side, hold it with the pliers, and once again give it a bit of a tap with the hammer just to flatten it out on top of the hinge there. And you end up with a piece of wire that looks like this. Again, it's about the same distance out from the buffer beam as the hook. Now the chain I've got it looks like it's copper here, but that's actually a coating on iron core chain. And I'll be using 3 links of this chain. The links were supposed to be 4 millimeters long, but as you can see there, each link is about 5 millimeters long, so you can't trust the packaging on these things. You've just got to source your own materials, and it's probably better to do it by actually physically going to a shop and buying them instead of doing it over the internet. I've had one bad experience with buying over the internet, but this turns out to be quite a good size actually, very close to prototypical. And this is a set of jeweler's pliers, and these are extremely useful for opening up the links when you want to remove a section of chain. I highly recommend getting a pair of those. Now, I don't want the copper colour on the chain, so the method I use to get rid of the copper is I place the 3 links on the new hook that it's about to receive, put it in the vise, and then I heat it up with a small blowtorch. What this does is burn off that copper coating and reveals eventually an iron coloured set of links there. You'll notice that the galvanised hook has also got a crusty sort of appearance to it now, but that can be cleaned up with a wire brush, and then it will look like this. What we do next is rotate the hook 90 degrees in the vise so that it can hold the links, and then you get something to hold the other end of the chain. I've got a hook here, and hold the chain tight, and whilst you're holding it tight, put a drop of super glue onto the middle link so that you're gluing the left hand link and the right hand link to the center link. Don't get any super glue on the outer links, just purely on the middle link.
And once it's drying, or say about 75% dry to 80% dry, you'll find that it'll stay straight, but just pull it out and put it in a pair of long nose pliers and just squeeze the end links down tight. Make sure everything's flat. The center link has to be at a right angle to the two end links for everything to work properly. You don't want any sort of twisted links or anything like that. Now we fit the hook into the end of the chassis, and you can see I've got way too much wire there, and it needs to be cut about there so I can fit the weight in, and then we'll remove this piece that's cut off. And it should look like something like that. You push it up hard to the buffer beam, and then we can put the weight in to check how things are going. You'll notice the magnet at this end here is in place. It's in between the wagon weight, and we've got a bit of clearance here for the hook for the chain. This is how it looks when it's all put back together. So we've got a little hook at this end, and we've got a chain at the other end. Now when we put it on the track, sorry about the blurry chain there, but it's hard to focus on something that close. You can see with the hook on the right and the chain on the left, they're compressed, and the center link has become the spacer between these two, and you can see I've got a good gap here between the buffers, which is excellent for pushing. Now when the wagons are pulling, a different story of course. The chain is being held here by the hook on this wagon and the hook on this wagon here. There's an overhead showing compression. It's not quite compressed. And this is what I use as a shunter's pole. It's 4mm bamboo skewer, and I've used this because there's no risk of it being attracted to any of the magnets, and also this is a piece of standard one single strand copper wire, which can be bent to any shape you like really, but again it's not attracted to any magnets or anything, so it doesn't create any extra sort of magnetic or false magnetic fields when you're trying to couple or uncouple the wagons.
G'day folks, and we're back again, and we've got the little wagon in question. Now the reason this system works is because firstly that the chain is now rigid, there's no play in it, so that's a visual compromise we've got to make for a mechanical plus. And because the chain is rigid, it acts like a connecting bar, I suppose, if you like, between two wagons or a wagon and a loco. Now the other reason it works is because the hook that's holding the chain is set off the buffer beam far enough to allow the link of the chain that's connected to the hook to pivot behind the front end of the hook. In other words, the hook has become like a pivot for the chain. If you have the hook too close to the buffer beam, when the chain is pushed up against it, it'll get stuck one way or the other because it can't rotate freely. So that's an important consideration, is the length of the link compared to the hook. So that needs to move freely when the chain is pushed up against that hook there. And it's the same with the hook at the other end. You know, you need any obstructions out of the way so these things can pivot freely. And if they can pivot freely, well then you can push through S formations on track, etc., and it will work. It's as simple as that. So now we'll have a look at it on the track. Okay folks, here we have our two wagons with the system in place, and I want to uncouple, so I bring down the end of my shunter's pole and just push down on the coupling and it releases, and then the loco can pull the other wagon away. Now if we want to couple up, we just bring it back to about there. Now I'll use the other end of my shunter's pole with the little orange wire on it. Simply come in behind the chain, lift it up, and the magnet draws it up to the hook. And you may notice that it's not hooked on properly, but as it pulls away, because of the magnetic attraction, the chain drags along the bottom of the hook, and then the last link actually hooks on and pulls it away. Here's a side view to just give you a better idea. That's simple. And then we just bring the loco down to it, if it will, without pushing it down the hill. That's close enough. And then just bring the little shunter's pole in, and away we go. Now this old wagon was the dummy for all this work, and it's been knocked around a bit, but same on the loco. Just get rid of the chain and away you go. Now I'll send it through an S formation, folks. It's coming along now just under the bridge and passes on along through the S into the siding. You can also uncouple on the move if that takes your fancy. No trouble at all. And we'll bring the loco back in to pick up the wagons. And again we just use the shunter's pole. And away we go. I'll now give you an overhead, folks, of what's going on here. Going through the S formation. It's quite hard to film this, but you'll get the idea. To give you a better idea, I've just uncoupled from the loco, and I'll just slowly push the wagons through the point. You can see what's going on there with the chain, keeping the buffers apart. If we come back the other way, pulling is never a problem. Pushing is the issue to overcome here. Now all my points, the smallest radius I've got is medium, so you've got to bear that in mind. If you've got small radius points, you might have to increase the length of the hook away from the buffer beam and the hook for the chain away from the buffer beam to give you more clearance. Now folks, an added bonus with this system, and it's really a happy accident that this has happened. You may remember that when I was mucking around with the Brian Kirby method for automatic uncoupling, I've set magnets in the track. There's bar magnets here in between the sleepers. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 neodymium bar magnets in between the sleepers. Now this seems to take all 4 of them. I've tried it with 1, I've tried it with 2, and it doesn't work. And I've tried it with 3. You seem to need 4 for this to work. But if we bring the wagon down, pushed by the loco, and it's uncoupled, folks, you'll have to trust me on this, it's uncoupled at the moment. Just watch the coupling between the wagon and the loco. The magnets have drawn the chain up so it hooks onto the hook there, and when you start pulling away properly, it's grabbed the train. Now I'll show you again. We'll try it on the other wagon. I'll just uncouple that. Now this time it's the little green open wagon. It's uncoupled. Just watch the chain. And that will be drawn in and coupled up properly. Now what it means, folks, is if this thing is placed in a strategic position on your railway, I'm back here behind the camera, there's my hand coming over there, I'm way back here behind the camera, I'm about, what would I be, good 4 feet away from the coupling point down there that I just showed you. If I send the loco down and push the wagons to that coupling point, I've got it, automatic coupling, which takes some of the pain out of coupling and uncoupling chain link couplings. So there you go, and I can bring it back, and of course it will stay coupled over that coupling point, and I can take it right up to the end. Now of course I've gone past those magnets now, and I will have to whoops. Hey, can you still see that? Yes, you can. I'll have to walk up there now to uncouple and leave the wagons there. Of course, now that I've gone past the uncoupling point, or the coupling point I should call it, I'm back to doing it manually. So, as I said, this it's a bit of a happy accident. Placement of the magnets would be the critical thing. They could become a nuisance, I suppose, but who knows. Now folks, what I've done with the locomotive, I'll just take the guts out of it and I'll show you. It's a thing we should cover as well. I'll just grab my little pointer here. Now, I've got a hook on the front of the loco, and that's set out about 4mm from the buffer beam, in the centre of the buffer beam. I think that's a good way to go. I originally tried these things below the buffer beam and all. I've tried all sorts of configurations, but if you come back to the centre of the buffer beam where the hooks are supposed to be, everything seems to work. And it's, pretty much all the stock is around about that height. So anyway, so I've put my hook, the staple, through the buffer beam there, and I've put it, pushed it in so it's absolutely flush with the back of the buffer beam, and it's glued in with super glue. And then I've got a little neodymium magnet sitting on the back of it. That's how it seems to work best in this sort of situation. So sometimes it's a bit of trial and error to see what works. Of course, the other end, I have fiddled around with the hook on there. I've pulled them out, put them in, pulled them out, put them in. There's still the chain to go in there as well. Now I'm going to have to be careful there, excuse me, and use the same method, because the chassis actually rubs on that back wall of the loco there to actually fit in. So yeah, so anyway, there we go. So I hope you've enjoyed that. It's ready to rock and roll as far as I'm concerned. And if you look at these things, I bought a metre of chain for $3.95 Australian. 3 links are 12mm long, so that gives me about 80 couplings out of that $3.95 worth of chain. The wire I buy from Bunnings, our big hardware retailer here in Australia. Excuse me again. And that's around $7 for 50 metres. So we're looking at peanuts, folks. The most expensive part is the neodymium magnets, and you get about 50 of those for about $18, something like that. So it's a very cost-effective system. And of course, don't forget the shunter's pole. I've got a packet of those, 100 of those for $2 yesterday, and a bit of wire in the end. So this costs nothing to set up. What it does take is a bit of time and preparing, but you know, the results are worth it, I reckon. I've come from tension lock couplings to small tension lock couplings and using the Brian Kirby system. The Brian Kirby system is automatic, but somehow I prefer the flexibility of this. You can uncouple where you want, you can couple where you want. So have a think about it, folks, and see how you go with it. Let me know what you think. I'll see you later. Cheers, Gormo.